Hey guys, welcome back for another Jedi Journal entry. Today we will look at the concept of free will within the Star Wars universe when it comes in conflict with determinism. This video will go more into philosophy and some religious elements than my previous videos to really explore the concept of free will within Star Wars. With all the talk in the Star Wars movies about prophecy and destiny, it raises the question of how much free will our characters have. If someone, i.e., Anakin, is the chosen one and has a prophecy about himself, then how much freedom does he really have in making his own choices? Is it possible for him to fail to fulfill this prophecy? Must he fall from grace and become Darth Vader? Does Luke have a choice in being the catalyst for his father's salvation? Soren Kierkegaard said that life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. This is evidently true because the future is clouded for us here in our world. Even for the Jedi with their clairvoyance, the future is clouded. There is no certainty of future events. Luke has a vision on Dagobah of a city in the clouds where his friends were in pain, and he asked Yoda if they would die. Yoda could only reply that it was difficult to see as the future is always in motion. So while even Yoda doesn't have a perfect view of the future, there was at least one individual who did, the one who made the prophecy. And it is this individual's omniscient perspective that raises our questions about freedom. Here in our world, we have religions that worship omniscient gods, or one singular God that knows all and sees all. If God knows all and sees all, if He knows what we are doing and what we are going to do in all circumstances, regardless of what we think we know, then how are we truly free? Was I free to make this video? Were you free to watch it? But if we explore a little more of this godly, omniscient nature, we might be able to figure it out. Many philosophers have said that we cannot know God's nature as it is beyond our understanding, or even our ability to understand. But some will agree that this supposed God does not exist, quote, in time. St. Thomas Aquinas relies on Aristotle's argument that time is the measure of motion, and that without motion there can be no time, and with no universe you cannot have motion, as there is nothing that exists, similar to how the force requires living things to exist. This God would exist outside the universe because he would have created the universe. Since time requires the existence of a universe that contains things in motion, and God could exist outside of the universe, or even if it never existed, then God would exist outside of time, and thus be eternal. We experience time in a linear fashion. There is a start point and an end point, and lots of little points in between. You must live through your first birthday to become 2 years old, and your second birthday to become 3 years old. But, from the eternal perspective, all of the events in the universe happen simultaneously, as if you were seeing every single frame of all the Star Wars movies in one single instant, not one after another in sequential order. Luke gets his hand cut off and tells the Emperor that he is a Jedi in the same exact moment. If we could see from this eternal perspective, we would know the past as well as the future. We would also know the present. For linear observers like ourselves, the future doesn't exist because we have not lived past that point yet. But in an eternal bird's-eye view, the future happens simultaneously with the past and the present. The things that you debate are choices or not have already happened from this view because all events and choices happen simultaneously. Because remember, from the eternal observer, you stand outside of time. Time does not exist, and so all events happen at the same exact instant. The question then becomes if the eternal observer's knowledge of our future determines our future or not. After all, how can one change a future that is already known to someone who can't be wrong? Anakin, it would seem, is incapable of failing to bring balance to the Force, as he has no free will in doing so. But this operates on the assumption that the eternal observer's knowledge determines fate. Vader looks from the Emperor to his son being electrocuted and finally makes his choice to kill Palpatine and throw him down the reactor shaft. This decision destroys the Sith Order and destroys the presence of the dark side in the galaxy, thus bringing balance to the Force, something he was destined to do. It may be that this choice Anakin makes is what determines the eternal observer's knowledge of what Anakin will do, not the other way around. Anakin's future choices to overthrow the Sith and destroy the dark side are known in the past because from the eternal perspective, they happened simultaneously with the past and the present. Anakin's choices determine what the eternal observer sees, not the other way around. I had a teacher in high school who said that the idea that God knows everything means that we don't have free will can be countered by imagining an infant sitting in a height chair. Now imagine yourself walking towards this baby with a bowl of Cheerios. You place the bowl of Cheerios on the table and you tell the baby, "Don't knock over this bowl of Cheerios." And you turn around and start to walk away. What does the baby do in your mind right now? Did it knock it over? Did it just sit and eat them? The answer doesn't really matter. What matters is that you know what the baby is going to do. You did not make the baby do whatever it did, but you knew the baby to such an intimate degree, partially because you created it, that you knew what it was going to do before it happened. That does not violate the baby's free will, and it doesn't mean your knowledge made it happen. In this example, you are like a god with an eternal perspective. Augustine explores the eternal perspective by comparing it to our own remembering of the past. He says, "Why cannot God justly punish what he does not force to be done, even though he foreknows it? Your recollection of events in the past does not compel them to occur. In that same way, God's foreknowledge of future events does not compel them to take place. As you remember certain things that you have done and yet have not done, all the things that you remember, so God foreknows all the things of which he himself is the cause, and yet he is not the cause of all that he foreknows." That is all fine and understandable, but what if there are no eternal observers? Maybe all that exists is the present moment we linear observers see here and now. Maybe when Yoda says, "always in motion is the future," he really means that the future isn't set because it does not exist. When the future does exist, we call it the present, so nothing we would call the future actually exists. Sidious puts his plans into motion to take control of the galaxy and bring down the Jedi Order. He says on multiple occasions that everything is proceeding as I have foreseen. But then in Empire he tells Vader that Luke could destroy us. Now, we all know that things don't go as the Emperor had foreseen, because otherwise he would not have been cackling away to Vader after saying so. He also wouldn't have looked so disappointed when Luke shuts off his saber after beating Vader and declares his allegiance to the good side. Some say that God created all things in the universe and can pull strings as he wishes, but does he also pull at the strings of free will? If he does, if he determines our actions, then how can we be punished when we do wrong? Some religious philosophers might say that with grace we are influenced to do good, but that this grace comes to us only if we choose to invite it, and that it can also be refused. By creating humanity with free will, God would limit his power over us, but not necessarily over everything around us. God in this way would only have as much power over us as Palpatine had over Anakin or Luke. Palpatine, despite his immense power, or unlimited power, is little more than a limited mortal man. An omnipotent being like a god could have made humanity as a bunch of automatons only ever doing his will, rather like the clone troopers that were genetically bred to follow orders without question. But by giving free will, this God would have limited his own power over us voluntarily due to our design. We would be the ones in control of our decisions and would be deserving of our rewards or punishments as they come. But even with no future and no eternal, all-powerful observer, we still have not fixed the issue of fate. Obi-Wan may have been fated to die at Vader's hands on the first Death Star, but when the time comes, it is Obi-Wan that chooses to lower his guard and be killed. The question can be resolved the same way we did earlier. Perhaps Obi-Wan's decision is what makes his fate true. What if Obi-Wan only allowed Vader to kill him because there were no alternatives? Can we truly have freedom if we do not have alternative choices? Vader suffers from a lack of freedom in that he is bound to his master and even thinks it is too late for him to be anything else or even redeemed. Qui-Gon states that finding Anakin, at the time the supposed chosen one, was the will of the Force. If the will of the Force determines the fate of the universe and thus eliminates alternative choices, then how can anyone truly be said to be making their own decisions? Only people like Han Solo, who reject the idea of the will of the Force, would be free in a theoretical sense. John Locke notes that alternative choices don't always mean freedom, however. He says, "Suppose a man be carried while fast asleep into a room where is a person he longs to see and speak with, and be there locked fast in, beyond his power to get out. He awakes, and is glad to find himself in so desirable company, which he stays willingly in, i.e., prefers to stay to going away. I ask, is not his stay voluntary? I think nobody will doubt it, and yet being locked fast in, 'tis evident he is not at liberty not to stay. He has not freedom to be gone." According to Locke, regardless of the lock on the door, the trapped man is not free only if he decides he wants to leave. It would seem to come down to an individual's will and their desire to do one thing or another that determines freedom. Acting freely and doing evil would then be an issue of twisted desire from the individual. Each person then is the cause of their own evil doing. I talked in one of my earlier videos about Augustine's view of inordinate desire being something that the Jedi avoid. This inordinate desire is a focus on temporal things, while good people would live by turning their love toward things that can be had without fear of loss. Evil people would then work to keep these things they love around them and remove obstacles that get in their way from doing so. Anakin does this when he is unable to control his love for his mother and his wife. George Lucas said that Anakin's problem is his inability to let go of things. As he sought more power to try to change people's fates so that they are the way he wants them to be, that greed goes from trying to save the one you love to realizing that you can control the universe. Anakin's downfall comes from his inordinate desire. Anakin is free to choose to ally with the dark side because that choice comes from his own will to follow his inordinate desires. Luke discovers in the cave on Dagobah that he too has the potential to chase his inordinate desires and be corrupted, but it is ultimately Luke's choice to do so or not. Obi-Wan and Yoda cannot dictate Luke's will. They can only teach him and offer guidance on his way to becoming a Jedi. Like the heroes we watch in our favorite movies and TV shows, it's important to remember to figure out what forces are trying to control our will. What desires or habits do we have that can become inordinate and might dominate us? We are always free to choose our own path regardless of the obstacles put in our way, be they random happenstance or from an eternal observer pulling the strings. Like the philosophy of Stoicism, we may not be able to control what happens to us, but we can control how we react to our situations. This Stoic philosophy is something we know the Jedi practice. They do not wish to dominate the world around them, but they work and train to make sure that they are capable and equipped to handle themselves in whatever situation they are in. They stay balanced and serve the Force. So too can we take this wisdom and apply it to our lives. We can choose how to act and react in any situation we are in, regardless of the things we might claim have control over us, be they figures of authority or our peers. We are the ones that have control over ourselves, and even when faced with hard decisions, we can stand strong and be virtuous, and it is our decisions that would determine what this eternal observer sees as the, quote, future, rather than the other way around. It is your decisions that shape what the crystal ball shows. The crystal ball does not determine what you are going to do. Well, this concludes my thoughts on free will in Star Wars. If you enjoy what I had to say, click the like button down below, subscribe for more of my content, which should be coming soon. If you want to receive notifications of when that will be, hit the little bell icon down below as well so you won't miss the next one. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you all next time. May the Force be with you.